Why would a global superstar like Jungkook, one of BTS's most cherished and loyal members, risk everything, his image, career, and relationship with the entertainment giant HYBE, just to stand against the very system that helped him rise? What pushed the golden magne to reportedly defy internal decisions, break unspoken rules, and challenge the company's authority? And most importantly, what does Jin, BTS's oldest member and the first to enlist, have to do with this storm brewing behind closed doors as the K-pop industry continues to dazzle fans with glossy images and perfectly choreographed perfection? Not everything behind the scenes is as seamless. Beneath the surface of smiles, awards, and sold-out arenas, pressure simmers. Jungkook, long praised for his professionalism, talent, and loyalty, has shocked armies and insiders alike with whispers of discontent. And this time, it's personal. The story doesn't begin with a scandal, but rather a silence. It started when Jin, fresh from completing his mandatory military service, returned to a world that had evolved while he was away. His return was celebrated with tears, hashtags, and headlines. Yet something felt off. Despite the euphoria, fans noticed an unusual lack of coordinated promotion from HYBE. No press conference, no official documentary-style content, no branded welcome back event. Jin, the heart of BTS, the worldwide handsome member who often kept the group's energy light even in darkness, returned not with a bang, but with a muted thud. Why? Jungkook, known for his reserved nature and deep emotional currents, reportedly did not take this lightly. Sources close to HYBE suggested that he questioned the company directly, not just once, but repeatedly. Why was Jin's return treated so coldly? Why was the spotlight dimmer than expected? Why was there no full-scale reunion content planned? Or if there was, why had it been delayed? What happened next is where speculation turns to shock. Multiple insiders, under condition of anonymity, revealed that Jungkook had sat down with HYBE executives in a tense, private meeting. While many expected him to maintain his usual diplomatic tone, witnesses described a version of Jungkook rarely seen: firm, passionate, even emotional. He allegedly demanded clarity, even accountability. It was a side of Jungkook that hadn't been public until now. And that's exactly what made the room go silent. Was this simply about brotherhood? Or is there a deeper fracture between BTS and the company they've helped build into a global powerhouse? To understand the magnitude of Jungkook's stance, one must understand the unshakable bond between BTS members. These are not just bandmates. They are brothers who've endured sleepless nights, online hate, injuries, and impossible expectations together. Jungkook, who joined Big Hit as a shy 13-year-old trainee, has openly stated that Jin was one of his biggest emotional anchors. During difficult times, it was Jin who cooked for him, cheered him up, and pulled him out of dark spirals. And now, when the spotlight should have been waiting for Jin's triumphant return, it was Jungkook who noticed the dimmed lights. HYBE's response? So far, silence. This silence has only added fuel to the fire. Fan communities exploded. Speculation ran rampant on Twitter, TikTok, and forums across the globe. Some believed HYBE was intentionally sidelining Jin to shift the narrative toward newer projects, such as expanding into Western markets or launching new groups. Others wondered if internal disagreements had made Jin less commercially viable. But what about loyalty? What about the fans who waited over 500 days to see their beloved Jin return? Jungkook's rumored confrontation wasn't just about scheduling or PR. It was about principle. In one emotional live stream shortly after Jin's return, Jungkook, without naming names, told fans, "Sometimes the people you love deserve more than silence. They deserve the whole world welcoming them back." It was subtle. It was cryptic. But to many armies, it was a siren call, a sign that not all was well behind the carefully constructed curtain of K-pop perfection. This isn't the first time HYBE has faced criticism for mishandling communication around BTS's milestones. But it may be the first time a member so publicly, so vulnerably pushed back. And with the group's hiatus during military service, cracks seem more visible than ever. What does this mean for the future of BTS? More importantly, what does it mean for Jungkook's relationship with HYBE? The company has invested millions into his solo career, from global releases like 7 and Standing Next to You to international appearances. Would Jungkook risk all that just to defend a bandmate's dignity? Apparently, yes. Behind-the-scenes staffers reported that Jungkook has increasingly asserted more creative and promotional control. It's no longer about playing the obedient idol. It's about protecting the values that BTS built from the ground up: trust, honesty, and brotherhood. And what about Jin? In a brief but telling interview during a casual appearance, Jin smiled and said, "I don't need much. Just seeing the members again, that's enough for me." But even that understated reply couldn't mask the slight tremble in his voice, the weight in his eyes. Could this be the beginning of a deeper divide? Is the empire of BTS slowly shifting from being managed to managing themselves? More questions than answers loom in the air. But one thing is clear: Jungkook is no longer just the golden voice, the perfect face, the flawless performer. He is a force, emotional, driven, unafraid. And when that force speaks out not for himself, but for his hyung, it sends a powerful message to fans and industry leaders alike. This is no ordinary K-pop headline. This is the beating heart of a story still unfolding, where loyalty might just be stronger than contracts, and silence is no longer acceptable. Why did Jungkook risk it all? Why did HYBE downplay Jin's return? And what will happen now that one of BTS's brightest lights has decided to speak, not sing, as whispers turned into waves, and waves began crashing at the doors of HYBE headquarters? The fandom waited. They waited not just for statements or tweets, but for truth. Yet, the deeper one digs, the more haunting the silence becomes. Was this truly about a lack of promotion? Or did Jungkook see something bigger? Something darker? Something that threatened the very soul of BTS? We return to the tension that has steadily grown since Jin's return. Where was the official HYBE documentary-style coverage we'd seen for other artists? Where were the behind-the-scenes reunions? The symbolic gestures the company was once known for when reuniting its talent, and more importantly, where was the unity? Days after Jin's military discharge, fans noticed something almost chilling. HYBE quietly updated its internal schedule, scrapping a previously rumored comeback documentary celebrating BTS's journey through military enlistment. A source familiar with internal HYBE operations, speaking anonymously, claimed that the project was paused due to internal disagreements about narrative direction. Narrative direction. Those two words sent chills through armies worldwide. What narrative was being controlled? Who was writing BTS's story, if not BTS themselves? And could it be, as many now believe, that Jin's quiet return wasn't just a scheduling oversight, but a deliberate muting? Jungkook, known to internal staff as both intensely private and fiercely loyal, wasn't having it point. One senior production manager, who had worked with the group since their early days, reportedly overheard a heated conversation between Jungkook and an executive during a post-meeting moment. "If Jin Hyung doesn't deserve a proper return, then none of us do," Jungkook said firmly. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a declaration. This wasn't the golden boy HYBE had raised. This was a man, one who had grown under the lights, yet refused to be blinded by them. Suddenly, the cracks weren't just rumors. They were real. Internally, reports claim that Jungkook began pushing for control over certain content rights, specifically involving how BTS's legacy, particularly military-era content, would be presented. He even allegedly halted the release of a solo promotional campaign to protest the neglect shown to Jin. That decision, according to insiders, cost HYBE over $3 million in delayed sponsorships. Yet Jungkook never flinched. The fandom erupted. Theories emerged that perhaps HYBE was preparing to shift its core promotional focus away from BTS entirely, leaning into their new groups like New Jeans and TWS. Some accused the company of strategic sidelining, speculating that BTS's return could threaten the delicate ecosystem HYBE was now trying to balance. But Jungkook? He wasn't strategizing. He was feeling. He was remembering nights during BTS's early years when Jin stayed behind to coach his vocals. He He was thinking of the time Jin shielded him from criticism after a poorly received performance, taking blame onto himself during interviews. He was remembering every laugh, every late-night ramen, every wordless hug. Jungkook wasn't just standing up for a bandmate. He was standing up for family. That emotional undercurrent finally broke the surface when, during a live Wever session, Jungkook looked directly into the camera and, with a tone both steady and shaking, said, "Even if the world forgets, I won't. Not him. Never." It wasn't just touching. It was revolutionary, and no K-pop idol had ever taken such a transparent emotional stance against the mechanisms of their own label, and survived. The shockwaves were immediate. Fans demanded statements. HYBE remained frozen. Korean news outlets cautiously hinted at creative tension behind closed doors, while international press tried, and failed, to obtain official comments from either party. But perhaps the most startling development came not from HYBE or Jungkook, but from Jin himself. In a carefully timed post, Jin uploaded a photo, just one, with no caption. It showed the entire group, circa 2015, crammed into a tiny dorm, eating together. His arm was draped over Jungkook's shoulder. The silence of that image was louder than any press release. The message? Crystal clear. They remember. And they're watching. What followed was nothing short of cinematic. Suddenly, fans began uncovering patterns. Archived interviews where Jin joked about being forgotten during enlistment. Moments during live performances where Jungkook glanced at Jin's empty spot. Even RM's recent solo lyrics. Not every return is celebrated. Not every hero gets a parade. Were now being reinterpreted as subtle shots at the system. And then, something nobody expected happened. HYBE blinked. An internal memo was leaked. In it, the company announced the sudden revival of the BTS Reconnect campaign, a large-scale, multi-platform series meant to document the group's reunification. Jin would be featured prominently. Footage that had previously been shelved would now be repurposed. And perhaps most telling of all, Jungkook had been listed as a co-executive producer. The Golden Magne had done it. He hadn't screamed. He hadn't broken contracts or taken to tabloids. He had simply stood up unwaveringly, unapologetically, for the man who had once stood up for him. But even in victory, a question remains. Why did HYBE hesitate in the first place? Could it be that Jin, having spent 2 years outside the company's daily machinery, had grown more independent, less controllable? Could his openness, his frequent interactions with fans, his unscripted honesty, have made him a less safe face for the new corporate era HYBE envisions? And if so, is Jungkook next? The future of BTS now stands at a strange crossroads. They are no longer the scrappy underdogs. They are kings, but kings in a court they no longer fully control. The empire they helped build may no longer serve them, but serve its own momentum. Still, they are not without power. And if this ordeal has proven anything, it's that their greatest strength has never been marketing, nor money, nor media. IT has always been each other. Jungkook's decision to risk his standing for Jin wasn't a rebellion. It was a reminder to HYBE, to the industry, and to the world that BTS is not a product. It is a brotherhood, one forged in sweat, in silence, and in sacrifice. And when one brother is left behind, another will always come back for him. So now we ask again, why did Jungkook defy HYBE? Because Jin deserved better. Because silence speaks volumes. Because family means everything. And because sometimes the strongest voice isn't the one that sings, but the one that refuses to stay quiet. Stay with us. The real story is just beginning. As the embers of discontent began to glow, something extraordinary happened. The story of Jungkook's silent stand caught fire, not just in South Korea, but across the globe. What began as whispers on Weverse turned into roaring hashtags that trended for days. Fans weren't confused anymore. They were awake, and what they saw left them burning. When a fandom as large, organized, and emotionally bonded as ARMY locks in on a cause, it becomes a force of nature. This was no longer a simple entertainment concern. It became a symbolic war, a struggle between artistic freedom and corporate narrative. Fans began dissecting every frame, every word, every silence. HYBE's social media posts were flooded. Journalists began circling. Even rival companies, usually cautious to a fault, began adjusting their public tones, quietly distancing themselves from HYBE's internal friction by doubling down on transparency with their own idols. But what was HYBE's response to this international tidal wave of scrutiny? At first, nothing. Then, curiously, a sudden wave of content drops featuring Jin began. Behind-the-scenes footage, casual photos, a cooking video from before his enlistment, even a teaser of him reuniting with staff. It was oddly timed, almost apologetic. But fans weren't fooled. They saw it for what it was: damage control. And at the center of it all, Jungkook remained unshaken and more vocal than ever before. During another live broadcast just a week after the memo leak, he addressed fans again, subtly but unmistakably. Don't ever think your voices go unheard. They're louder than you know. The message? Crystal clear. He heard them. HYBE heard them. And if the company tried to silence Jin, Jungkook would make sure the world screamed instead. It's important to pause here and understand something critical, something that makes this entire situation far more precarious than your average K-pop drama. Jungkook isn't just another artist under HYBE. He's a shareholder. He's an investor. He is, in many ways, both the product and partial owner of the BTS brand. His words don't just carry emotional weight. They carry legal implications. Any public act of defiance, even veiled, sends tremors across HYBE's financial spine. Already, their stock dipped 3.2% in the days following the leaked memo and Jungkook's indirect statements. To most CEOs, that's a line crossed. To HYBE, it was a wake-up call to they responded the only way they knew how. Spin controlled in a sudden PR maneuver. HYBE released a vague but polished press statement, claiming they were deeply honored to support Jin's return and are working closely with all members for upcoming projects. It was clean, sanitized, sterile, and utterly unbelievable. Because here's the truth the statement avoided: none of this would have happened if Jungkook had stayed silent. Jin would have quietly resumed activities, the public would have moved on, and HYBE's plans to reposition their portfolio away from BTS dominance would have continued uninterrupted. But Jungkook's refusal to let Jin be sidelined, his disruption of the narrative, cracked open a story that had been sealed shut. And now, that story is being rewritten. By the members, not the managers. Jin, for his part, has maintained an elegant restraint. But he did finally break his silence in one interview with a major Korean outlet. When asked if he felt disappointed in how his return was handled, he smiled, nodded softly, and said, "Sometimes it's hard when people forget how much you gave. But it's okay. The people who matter remembered." There was no mistaking it. He meant Jungkook, and with that one sentence, fans saw the deeper truth. Jin hadn't been forgotten by the world. He had been erased by the machinery designed to make others shine in his absence. This leads us to the most dangerous development of all: the rising internal shift within BTS themselves.